Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scot McKay.
All right, here we are again, gentlemen, with another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scot McKay, at Scot McKay on Twitter, Real Scot McKay on Instagram. You can find us on the web, as always, at www.mountaintoppodcast.com, and I invite you to join our group of real men who are striving to be better men every day of our lives at the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. Today, we're going to delve into a realm that we have never even discussed here on the show before. Some may argue it's where angels fear to tread, but we're going to do it anyway. And part of the reason why it is right now, right here, and this particular show on this particular day is because I found the proper guest to talk about this topic with. His name is Mark Singh, and he is an up-and-coming guy in the dating advice world. He's an NLP dating coach, and he comes from Colorado. Mark Singh, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you having me, Scott.
Yeah, man, pleasure's all mine. And we just recorded an episode of your show, which is called The Unapologetic Man, which is a title I really like, and I had a good time doing that. So I anticipate we're going to have an equally excellent time here talking about the topic du jour, which is raising daughters like a man. And, you know, I think to kick this whole conversation off, Mark, it's pretty much an established fact that we as guys, if we look forward to having children at all, and certainly I would offer in a moment of vulnerability that most of us as guys probably are terrified of potential fatherhood for a long, long time in our lives leading up to that moment, which we can talk about because it's relatively recent for you. But if we're interested in having children someday, we usually think about having a son, you know, a chip off the old block.
Yeah.
But having a daughter is very special too.
It is, man. It's been a total reality check for me. And as a dating coach, obviously, I've been in the game for a long time myself, 15 years of dealing with women and learning how to, quote unquote, seduce women, and found the love of my life. And we decided to have a daughter together, or a child together. And after 3 years of trying and not succeeding, we actually had to go through IVF, which I can discuss a little bit, the experience on that as well. And having that daughter just completely blew me away. My perception of women has changed considerably. My appreciation of femininity and the nurturing aspect of it has absolutely blown up. And even my own understanding of masculinity and what it means to be a man has completely changed. So having a daughter has been one of the most enlightening experiences of my entire life. And, you know, before the show, you and I were talking, what do we want to discuss? And this subject just kind of came up and we decided to roll with it. So yeah, I'm kind of excited to share my experience and share some of the insights that I've had on being a father.
Now, you're a new father. Your daughter is only a few months old, and this is your first, right?
This is my first. Yeah, she's 3 months old. And, yeah, it's my first. I wanted a boy, like you said, and I actually have this book sitting next to my bed. It's written by a Navy SEAL. It's like Raising Men. So I was reading this book, totally expecting to have a boy, and then we did the gender reveal where I shot a bow and arrow into a balloon, and that was pink, and that was quite a big surprise. And I was like, wow. One of my friends came up to me after that. He's like, "Hey, man, it's the player's curse." And I was like, yeah, this is pretty accurate right there. So, yeah, things have really changed, but I look forward to kind of sharing some of my insights on that.
Well, you know, you've alluded now twice to this idea that having a daughter may change your view of women in general. Mm-hmm. And I've heard that before. Indeed, a lot of these guys who were pickup artists and trying to get laid and talking about how to trick women into bed and stuff, you know, years on, a decade or so later, these are the same guys, but now they're married and they have daughters. And they kind of have an, oh my goodness moment where they think, you know, my attitude towards this has changed. And all of a sudden, instead of trying to bang a bunch of chicks, they're thinking, my goodness, by the time my kid is 16 years old, I'm going to be that old cranky guy on the porch with a shotgun. You know, is there really a transformation that takes place, or is it more of a realization that, hey, you know what, there's a little maturity involved in terms of evolving one's view of women?
You know, I think it's a little bit of both, because while my teaching centers on becoming a better man and essentially becoming the best version of yourself through cleaning up some of the BS that's going on in your mind and really showing women the most confident, highest self-esteem version of yourself, there's certainly some, for lack of a better word, manipulation that is involved in some of the things that I've taught, and even down to the principles like push-pull and cold reading and those things that we do as pickup artists that do get attraction. There's a little bit of manipulation there. Now, the conversation of manipulation, we can go into, well, don't women manipulate us too by wearing makeup and making themselves more beautiful? I mean, that's a whole different rabbit hole we could go down to. But looking back on my life and some of the things that I've done in order to get it in, yeah, there's that question of, what if somebody does that to my daughter? You're looking at this beautiful baby in front of you, knowing she's going to become a beautiful woman, and guys are going to try to do that to her, and I'm teaching guys to do that. So there's the juxtaposition of what have I done in the past? What am I teaching men to do? And how do I feel about teaching this to men when it could be my daughter that they're doing it to? So one of the core principles of my teaching is to help men to become what I like to call superior men. And in doing that, we don't need to use so much what might be called manipulation, but instead it's about presenting yourself to a woman in a way where she can see the authentic you. She can see that you actually will treat her well. But at the same time, sometimes I go back to some of my teachings and things like, push-pull and cold reading that does have some manipulation to it. And I wonder, well, what if somebody did that to my daughter? How would I feel about that? So it's given me some pause on some of the things that I've been teaching and how I can rectify that moving forward.
It really is kind of a reckoning of sorts when you have a daughter regarding what you really think of women. Because do I believe that women are sexual conquests and that's their primary purpose and that it's really cool to try to go trick them into bed or whatever? Or do I really believe that women are human beings to be respected now that I have one who I love in a much different capacity than I've ever loved a female human being before? And a lot of things start swirling around in your head, don't they? How have I treated women in the past? What have I thought about women in the past? And also, not to be underestimated, what do I think about women's sexuality in general? A lot of times guys have kind of this Madonna whore complex thing working where, I want to go ahead and marry a virgin, but at the same time, I want to decrease the worldwide population of virgins as much as I possibly can. A great thing to come to grips with is, do we as men really respect a woman's right to be sexual? As I'm going out as a full-grown man, meeting women and creating potentially sexual relationships with them, am I judging them as sluts for being sexual? Or have I afforded women the same sexual rights that I afford myself as a man? Am I looking past those societal constructs or constraints or mandates, whatever word you want to use to describe them, about how women should act sexually as, ladies versus what we celebrate about men and their sexuality and how they should act? If you really believe that a woman has every right to a healthy, happy sex life, then where the rubber is going to meet the road is when you father a daughter or two, as I have. You have to ask yourself, am I going to be okay with my daughter having a potentially happy, healthy sex life someday?
No, absolutely not.
You're not?
No, absolutely not. No, I'm just kidding. But it makes me think of this T-shirt I saw where it says "Dad" and it's a mnemonic for defending against douchebags. Now
that's a low view of men.
No, of course it is. Of course it is. And I'm making a joke as to that. But when you talk about, will I be, can I reconcile with the fact that she's going to, be sexual? At this point, man, I haven't even dipped my toe in the water of that yet. I mean, she's 3 months old, but as I think about it now, why is it that every instinct in me doesn't want that to happen? Why is it that we as fathers want to prevent that so completely that we have T-shirts like that, right? That say defending against douchebags. And we have the image of the father with his arms crossed or perhaps a shotgun in his hands when the suitor comes to pick up his daughter. Why do we have that so ingrained within us?
Yeah, well, this show is definitely a baptism by fire for a young buck like you who's just actually 3 months into fatherhood. And so for that, I offer no apology, but I definitely offer my sympathy and empathy because I've definitely been there myself, which is something we'll talk about. I'm reminded of a John Mayer song, which is now years old, called Daughters. And the recurring theme of that song is fathers, be good to your daughters because daughters will love like you do. The sobering realization that's evident in the lyrics of that song is our view of women will become our daughter's view of herself. If we believe women are sluts or not as worthy of respect or indeed not as valuable as men, then we will have daughters with low self-esteem who believe they should go around trying to find the love of a man who will respect them, especially if their fathers have not. Meanwhile, if we are fathers who empower our daughters, love our daughters, treat our daughters with respect, then they will go and find a man who respects them and treats them in a good, proper manner, because that's how they've been taught. Now, society nowadays would have us all believe that fathers don't matter. Fathers not only do not matter to our sons, which is a laugh, but they don't matter to our daughters either, which in my opinion is equally laughable. We as fathers are the presiders over our household. We protect. We make daughters feel safe and comfortable in our presence the way we make our wives and our girlfriends, our female partners, whatever capacity they serve. As much as we make mama feel comfortable is as much as we make our daughters feel comfortable in our presence. And when our daughters are feeling safe and comfortable, then they can feel that their dad has meaning to them in a positive way, and they can look up to that meaning their dad represents in the family. And it has ramifications for our future. So in my personal history, when I was in my 30s, I decided I no longer wanted to have this double standard with regard to women's sexuality. I wanted to believe and act on that belief such that women had every right to be sexual as I did and be happy in their sex lives. And I'll admit it's a challenge to somehow afford that right to your daughter because we do have that sexually protective instinct towards our daughters. And yet, I want my daughters to have healthy sex lives. And I have to have some sort of trust that what I've modeled for them in terms of what a healthy partnership should look like, especially with my younger daughter and the rather healthy woman who is her mom, who I'm married to now, I have to trust that what we've modeled is going to translate into her making good sexual decisions. And yet, at the same time, she has a right to an orgasm or two. She may grow up to be a heterosexual woman and have sexual needs like any heterosexual woman would have, and that means she likes to have sex with men. Now, we could talk about what happens if your kids grow up with another sexual orientation, and that's something that a lot of guys who are heterosexual don't even consider. But certainly in terms of thinking of our daughters and their sexuality, we look at that innocence of that baby and into her toddler years and into her preschool years. And we just can't even think of the thought of her becoming a sexual being someday. And in just about every way you can think of, that's perfectly reasonable for us to think that way. But then all of a sudden she hits puberty. She becomes a teenager. The boys start becoming interested, and we have to keep her head on straight and help her make good decisions and help prepare her to have a healthy relationship with men in the future. I think that's really the bottom line.
For all those years, I was so focused on the seduction element, how to get girls, how to get them attracted, how to clean up the BS in my head so that when I go up to a woman and I present to her, when I speak to her, she can immediately tell that I do have that high self-esteem, that I do have my inner workings together, and that I am attractive. And it wasn't until, I'm 42, and it literally wasn't until 4 years ago that I met my current partner, Marissa, and completely fell head over heels in love with her and really worked on how to develop a healthy relationship with a woman. And letting myself get into that relationship, committing myself fully to her, loving her, and actually needing her has helped me to realize that in having that healthy relationship with Marissa, my daughter is going to see that. She's going to see how I treat Marissa. She's also going to see how I treat her with love as the forefront. Love is the forefront, and vulnerability as a man is at the forefront of my relationship with the both of them, my girls. And through that, that will be an example of the kind of guy that she'll get, who, just like I treat Marissa well, will treat her well. Now, will I stand there with my arms crossed and say, hey, you better treat her right? I mean, of course, I'm the dad. But it's just released something in me, this protector feeling in me that I'd never experienced before. And it was really an eye-opening event. When she was born, we had a really, really difficult pregnancy. And that's something I wanted to touch upon in this podcast as well, is that any guys who are listening, even if you're a young man and you're going to have kids in the future, the pregnancy, the birth doesn't always go as you expect it to. And I was supposed to deliver the baby, and I was supposed to, hand her to Marissa and have this whole big moment, but it did not go that way whatsoever. In fact, what happened was an emergency C-section, and I was stuck in a different room, almost crying my eyes out because I didn't know what was happening. Marissa was unconscious. She didn't get to be there for the birth of her daughter. It was very, very traumatic. Now, new memories are being made where we're leaving that behind us. But when you have these expectations of what should happen, how it should be, you realize that life doesn't always give you what you expect. And that was a good first lesson for me as a new father. And as you said, as a young buck getting into this, I'm not necessarily young, but I'm definitely new to this whole thing. And I can't have these expectations for what she's going to be. For all I know, she's going to be completely opposite. I mean, for you, Scott, your daughters are into BMX, and I'm sure you never once anticipated that they would get into that. Maybe you were hoping they would. But things go differently than the way you think they will. And I think the only thing you can do is just love her with nothing held back. Give her all the lessons you can. I mean, that's my plan anyway. Teach her everything I can so that she has the tools to deal with things effectively if and when those challenges arise that we cannot predict what are going to happen.
Hell, man, you still get to be a young buck. Who's counting?
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the inevitable adversity that comes up. And I'm sure that what transpired leading up to and during the birth of your daughter certainly was traumatic for both you and your wife, and probably for your daughter also. Those things happen. Life is what happens when we make other plans, right? That's the old adage.
Yeah.
And certainly parenthood will throw challenges and stress and blood-curdling emergencies and 2 a.m. ambulance rides at you. And people are like, well, hell no. Why don't I just keep it simple? Why don't I just avoid parenthood and live my life, do what I want to do, and not have this burden of these children around? And I'll tell you, life, if you ask anybody who's ever actually gotten off of their couch and gone outside and had an adventure, they will invariably tell you that when you have your adrenaline pumping, when you're outside of your comfort familiarity zone, when you're experiencing something new, when something is at stake, when everything is on the line, maybe, that's when you feel most alive. You kind of feel dead to the world sitting in suburbia watching someone else live on TV. And I would offer that part of the beauty of parenthood is feeling alive, because the kids will bring fun, enjoyment, and they will also bring unexpected twists and turns. You never really exactly know what to expect. Certainly you're living for someone other than simply yourself anymore. But, unless you're really self-absorbed as a person, that's not such a bad thing. It feels great to have little kids love you and need you and look up to you and look like you. And, when you marry a pretty woman, I've noticed that typically the kids tend to take on her good looks.
Thank God.
I back that up. But that's one of the unexpected and definite truths about making sure you marry a beautiful woman is you'll have great looking kids.
Yeah.
And indeed, when you marry a woman you actually like and you have healthy self-esteem, chances are near 100% that you'll actually like your kids, because there'll be a nice mixture of both you and your wife. You know, when you hate yourself, when you can't stand each other, well, you know, all bets are off. And lots of comedians have cracked jokes about how people really don't like their own children, but they have to fake it. And that's really a sad state of affairs. But the beauty of having children is it's always an adventure, and yet you have to take yourself a little less seriously. Certainly a lot of guys who maybe are in their late 20s or early 30s, they really dread this idea of telling dad jokes and becoming a goofball. And what those guys don't yet understand is if they were ever to become a single dad dating single moms, the single moms would absolutely love that dad-like aspect of them and get horny over it. Dad jokes are wonderful to moms. You know, it's all part of the safety and security that we offer children. Mom may fluff the nest and take care of things inside the nest. Dad is like the eagle flying around the perimeter, making sure the world is safe and protected and presided over for the family to feel safe and comfortable inside, and for mama to do what she does as a woman. And yeah, your son's watching, your daughter's watching. Your daughter may emulate mama directly. Your son may emulate you directly. And that's, of course, wonderful, as long as, again, you have good, solid self-esteem. But see, your daughter's also learning about men from you. Now, whether she becomes a BMX racer or not, you know, I, like you said, am unexpectedly thrilled that my daughter not only was interested in doing one of my favorite sports over the course of my life, but also became arguably more passionate about it than I ever have been. You know, she could have gone into something else. And as a dad, I would have been, as I should have been, equally supportive. And that has indeed happened. My daughter's not unidimensional. She's into some other stuff, not necessarily things I'm particularly passionate about personally, apart from her interest in it. But, you know, both she and my son have gotten into things that I am supportive of because I love them and I want them to become good kids. But, you know, having brought that up, I think now is a good time to segue into this idea of how do we raise daughters as men? What is our view of femininity? What is our role in helping shape who she is as a woman? And I'll go ahead and offer, to kind of kick off this conversation here, that we do not believe femininity to be weakness around here. We do not believe that self-esteem, personal power, confidence, and what I love to talk about the most, which is grit or mental toughness, we don't believe those are gender-specific qualities. So we have gritty, self-confident little kids who know how to win and know how to lose, who can fall, scuff up their knees, brush it off, and go back and fight again. And yet my son is little boy, 100%, and my daughter is all girl all the time. She's pink and purple, long hair, bows, My Little Ponies and Shopkins and giggles, and yet she may be mentally tougher than most grown men I know at age 7. And that isn't an indictment on anybody in particular. It's simply a nod to how we're intentionally raising these children. Also, mom and I, we can bicker. We can be real with each other. We can be visceral because we trust each other. One thing mom and I, mom being Emily, of course, one thing Emily and I never do is we never insult each other. We never put each other down. We never openly resent having met each other. We don't show signs of self-loathing and self-hatred. And next thing you know, we've got a 12-year-old little boy and an 8-year-old little girl around the house who don't say, I wish you never would have been born. I mean, they bicker over the TV remote. You know, sometimes one of them's in a cranky mood, just like mom and dad are afforded to be. The other one knows how to back off. But people comment all the time about how my son is very protective of his little sister and how little sister is very appreciative of Big Brother and provides lots of joy and happiness to this family for all of us. And so the masculine, feminine roles are very much intact in this household. Yet everybody has personal power. Everybody is to be respected. Yes, mom and dad make the rules, but the children do get some input on, you know, what are we going to do this summer? What would you like to do? We value their opinions. We value their feelings. And the children, in turn, typically value our decision making. They may not want to go to bed at night. It may require a bit of an al dente attitude to get them to do what they need to do. But, all that's normal as parents, and it's certainly normal for children. And just to think, you have all this to look forward to. Wait until you have another one. Then that's like Bill Cosby once famously said, that's when you really become a parent. When you have siblings in the house.
When we were in the hospital for a week. We were in the nursing unit at the hospital, and it was all women in there. And watching these women deal with these babies, coming in and being able to quell a crying baby who's absolutely upset, and being able to know exactly what to do, and just having this instinct. And furthermore, seeing Marissa just take into motherhood in a way that I felt like I was lacking taking into fatherhood. Like when they handed me the baby, I was like, what the heck do I do with this thing? And then during the first month, it was like, man, this thing is just an annoyance machine. All it does is just annoy the hell out of me. What did I get myself into, right? Well, seeing the power of that femininity really blew me away in that nursing unit. Seeing the women and how powerful femininity is in its own way. It's a different kind of power from masculinity, but at the same time, it's very similar. But femininity is nurturing, it's compassion, it's caring for, it's instinctual knowing what that baby needs to hear or feel, and even knowing what we as men need to hear, feel, or just a slight touch that makes us feel better after a long day's work. That really blew my mind. And watching Marissa just last night, I was kind of spying on her as she was putting the baby to bed, and she was rocking the baby and reading her a book, and just watching her come into this motherly role makes me love and appreciate her so much more. And as she moves into that feminine role, I move more into my masculine role as the protector, provider, and presider of this household, making sure that the doors are locked and the lights are on and the security system is armed, making sure that I'm going to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 4 times a week so that if, something pops off, I can protect my family. And it really awakens something within me that I didn't have before. And you think, well, Mark, you lost so much. You can't go to the bars anymore and just get, like a same night blowjob. And I'm like, bro, I would give that up 10,000 times just to experience this, just to see what I saw last night with Marissa rocking that baby to bed. I would give that all up again and again and again to do that, because while it was fulfilling in my 20s and 30s, now that I've grown up a little bit and become more of a silverback, that is what I feel is the ultimate purpose of a man, is to be the tribe leader, is to father children and to lead their family into success, having children that are, well put together, well adjusted, and leading them into the society with a positive outlook on life, and being able to problem solve and communicate and do all these things that you and I, Scott, have worked so hard in ourselves. That's our purpose, is to hand it off. And while I expected to hand it off to a son, I'm even more excited now that I get to hand it off to a daughter, because it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to interact with that femininity. And I can't wait until whatever. I mean, even if she's a total tomboy and she wants to, ride motorcycles, whatever she wants to do, I'm there with her, and I'm so excited. And by the way, we did IVF to get our daughter, and we're going to try for a boy now. So when you said, hey, that's the real test of a father, I'm looking forward to that, man, because I want a son too.
Well, I'll tell you what, same night blowjobs from rando women aside, I can tell you with 100% truthful confidence, we have gone on more adventures, had more adrenaline rushes, had a better time, and grown more as human beings, not only since Emily and I have been married, but especially since we've brought children into the world to share all of that adventuring with. So yeah, I mean, anytime someone says, hey, once you're married, you're buried, and when you have children, basically your life is over, that lifestyle is going to be what you make of it. It isn't necessarily the end of all the wonderful adventures you'll have in your life. Which brings me to another point that you brought up. You acknowledged what I half-jokingly refer to consistently as God's dirty little trick. First of all, the whole idea of sex is designed to trick us into actually making babies because women are so sexy and they feel good and we just love to have orgasms. And then what happens is once the baby is actually born, it drives us nuts and makes our life a living hell and requires constant feeding and figuring out. And we have no idea what it wants. And it's ultimately frustrating, but it is really, really cute, which keeps us from killing it.
Yeah.
And, God's dirty little trick is one of those things that, thank goodness, is ingrained into every one of us. But I love what you said about that. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that you and your wife have not necessarily had an easy road even conceiving your children. In many ways, your little daughter's a miracle baby for both of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We did IVF, and that too, Scott, seeing her shoot herself. Do you know anything about IVF and what it takes to get the baby?
I've never known anybody who was trying IVF to shoot themselves. I mean, they may have wanted to after all, especially when they saw the bill.
Yeah. Thankfully, insurance covered that. Thank God. But what I meant is shoot herself with shots, and she has to put it, in her thigh. And I mean, I think it was like 6 shots a day for a month. And then at the very end, to trigger the release of the eggs, she had to do this one shot that looked like a foot-long needle that she had to get all the way down into the muscle in her thigh. And she just took it like a champ. Not one complaint. Let's do it. And now she's like, let's get another one. Let's do this again. I'm like, do you remember all the shots you had to give yourself? She's like, yep, I want to do it again. And she's trying to, convince me to do it. So seeing what she went through made me love her so much more. And yeah, getting our daughter definitely was a challenge, and never give up. And we got her a little onesie that says never quit on it. And when we put her in that thing, we realized just how hard we tried. A lot of the trying was fun. The IVF part was not fun, but how hard we tried to finally get that little baby. And she's our never give up little baby. And that, just getting her is a testament to that lesson. I want her to know that never give up, never quit, and that's going to stick with her for the rest of her life, because she's a product of that. And for that, it's a beautiful thing. Sometimes challenges have within them, actually all times challenges have within them, those seeds of progress and lessons that really stick with us the most. So all in all, it was just a beautiful, positive thing.
Yeah. Now the challenge is somehow not letting yourselves slip into miracle baby deity worship.
How does that work?
Oh, well, I know several parents who tried for years and years and years to have a child. And once that precious little child is born, the kid just becomes an incredibly spoiled brat and owns its parents, because, oh my goodness, this is a miracle. Yeah. Kind of have to still treat the kid like a human being, which I can only understand would be incredibly difficult. It's hard when your kids came along by natural birth. And, interestingly enough, Emily told me when we were dating that it was going to be rather difficult for her to have a child, and we may have an arduous road ahead of us. And she was pregnant a month and a half after we were married. So much for that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, this has been an excellent talk, excellent conversation about how to not just be a father to daughters, but really who we want to be as a father in general, how to interact with mom, and the art of raising our children to become strong, smart, successful adults. So this has been a lot of fun. Some things came up that I certainly didn't plan for, and that happens a lot on this show. So I certainly appreciate everything you offered, and I can only wish you happiness and blessings along the road as you raise your daughter and seek to have another little child. Because, part of me knows what you got coming up, and I'm smiling on your behalf because I think you'll just be thrilled at how life unfolds. And with that, I want to give these guys a chance to discover your podcast, which I either was a recent guest on or will be in the near future, depending on how your backlog matches up against mine, because we're recording both of those shows on the same day. And that show is called the Unapologetic Man Podcast. And you can find it on iTunes, and I will give you a link that'll send you directly to that. And that is www.mountaintoppodcast.com/sing, SING, which is Mark's surname. And, you'll be able to click on the link in the show notes page, or memorize it real quick right now, www.mountaintoppodcast.com/sing, SING, and, add another high-quality podcast to your subscription list. Mark Singh from Colorado, new dad to a wonderful, beautiful daughter. Thank you so much for joining us today. Great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, man, me too. And guys, if you haven't been to mountaintoppodcast.com just yet, there's a whole lot to delve into and enjoy there. You can get show notes. You can download transcripts of every show and get special reports on how to conduct relationships with women, how to get rid of your sticking points. And best of all, you can talk to me for 25 minutes for free simply by clicking on the red button at the upper right-hand corner of the website. Let me know when you'll be available to talk, and we'll get on the phone, and you'll find out that I am exactly the guy you expect me to be. And I look forward to talking to you, hearing what's on your mind, and figuring out a plan of action to help you reach the goals you want to reach, be the man you were born to be, and get the women in your life and the relationship in your life that you've always dreamed of. It's all there for you at www.mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.